Good afternoon, everyone. It's a pleasure welcoming Dr. Vikas Baniwal for a session on practicing dialogue, possibilities, and challenges. Dr. Vikas Baniwal is currently serving in the capacity of an assistant professor at the Department of Education, University of Delhi. He has been a general fellow for his postdoctoral work at the Indian Council of Philosophical Research, ICPR. He completed his doctoral studies from the University of Delhi in education in 2015. Overall, he has about 12 years of experience in school teaching, higher education, research, and administration. He has many publications to his credit, and his key research interests include dialogue, inter-subjectivity, inclusion, mental health, self, and identity. You're welcome, Dr. Baniwal. You have up to 2 hours for this session, and you're welcome to conduct it however you like. Over to you, sir.
Thank you very much, Behzad. So before I begin, a couple of caveats. One, this is not going to be a lecture. So, we have been teaching online for the last 1.5 years, and I know how fed up students are of lectures. So I do try to make the session as interactive as possible. So again, then in a way, I'm also shifting some responsibility towards you guys, because you would have to engage with me and take the conversation forward. So that's first. Second is that in my session, I will not be defending any position. So whenever you feel like, sir is defending or tilting towards something or the other, then I must assure you that it's only pedagogical, because I'm trying to take you to the logical extent of that position. So even though I do have my own position, but I try my best not to promote that in the class, or not to argue only from that position in any class. So that's second. Third is that being an interactive session, we are thinking together about core issues of dialogue. Now, whether the session itself becomes dialogical or not, that we can reflect at the end of the session. I would not claim that this session is going to be dialogical. So we'll begin with conversation, and let's see how far we can make it dialogical. Any questions, any point thus far? And so I will also stop and pause after every couple of points to have a sort of review, or to give space to all of you to reflect further, or if you want to delve deeper into any point, then you can go ahead. So yeah, anything regarding how we are going to approach this session? No, that's okay. So let me begin with you first. So what kind of issues or challenges do you foresee or are you facing regarding having dialogue or engaging in dialogue? You can write in the chat box. You can open your mic and speak up. Any issue or challenge that you are facing?
Want to speak? Pragya, please go ahead.
Yeah. Am I audible?
Yes, you are.
Okay. So I think one of the issues that is more recent, I don't know, maybe after the advent of social media especially, I feel that we tend to be pushed towards taking one or the other side. We are being pushed to extremes. There's a lack of the central, or generally there's a lack of dialogic space, because maybe it's the algorithms, maybe it's just what we keep seeing, what we are exposed to, but in general that space in between, and in fact the extremists on both sides try to make it us against them. It's so that is one thing that I've been observing, and one thing that I've had a lot of issues with.
Okay, great. Okay. When opponents are not ready to listen, Norem has said. Any other point? Any other issue or challenge that you are facing, or you have faced, or you want to delve deeper into? Yes, Jisha.
Sir, as I am from academia only, so what I feel is like whenever there is an exchange between a professor and a student, that exchange sometimes feels like it has one goal only. Like it doesn't have an holistic approach, because when you have a holistic approach, you give them chance for the student to think untouched boundaries, which was never the aim of this context. So yeah, I feel like the exchange between a teacher and a student should be more open rather than engulfed in a one-sidedness of a conversation.
Okay, that's a good point. Anyone else? It's okay. This was just to initiate some sort of thinking process. So let's begin then with the first question, and it is closer to what Jishan just said. What is the aim of dialogue? Why should we have dialogue at all? Yes, Arukia. Why should we have dialogue? Yes, please go ahead, Dipanshu.
Dipanshu, yeah.
Yes, sir. In my point of view, to reveal the greater sense of truth, which may not be revealed from one-sidedness, and at sometimes to resolve conflicts also.
Mm-hmm. So, which assumes that there is something called a universal or greater sense of truth, or there is some higher truth and some lower truth. That's first assumption. And the second is that we are able to grasp it. And
no, sir. I am not assuming that there is some truth, supreme truth, which is omnipotent. I am saying that there are truths from there are point of views, different truths. Everyone has his own truth. So when they are dialoguing, when they are interacting with each other, they may discover some different truth, which will be more better than these two.
Okay. So then in that case, I think we need to rethink our use of the word truth with a small t and then truth with a capital T, because then we have positions, we have experiences, we have beliefs, we have practices. And that's what we are learning. Because if we talk about subjective truths, then the notion of truth might lose its essence. So I'm not saying that we don't have our own realities, but to call them as our truth probably would make us implicitly limited. That this is my truth and I'm going to live by it. So by saying that this is my experience, it keeps me open to others' experience. This is my belief, keeps me open to others' beliefs. Saying that this is my position makes me open to others' positions. Think about it. We can come back to it again. Yes, Furqan.
Hello. I think it's all about knowing what we know and what we don't know. And actually having a dialogue is already showing us what we don't know, and we can learn from the others. And also when they actually confirm us, it's not 100% true, but then when they confirm us, we can also see what we know. It's all about also finding an ultimate version of knowledge, I guess.
Very interesting, quite Socratic in your essence, because that is also what Socrates wanted to say when he said that I'm the most wisest because I know that what I don't know. It's very interesting, and that also takes us towards this idea that what also Jishan highlighted, that we need to have a certain humility. We need to have certain acceptance of non-finality, because the moment we accept that what we know is not complete, it's not final, we become open. So yes, epistemologically, it is about knowing that we don't know. Ontologically, it's about becoming, that we still have to become more. We are more than what we think, or there are more to human possibilities. Interesting. Yes, Jishan.
So one thing we can say is that the aim of the aim of the dialogue should not be the certitude of the task, or rather than it should be about clarity and understanding, better knowing, rather than you are actually knowing something.
Very interesting. But here a question that might emerge is that if I know language, then why can't I be sure of the or why can't I be certain about the meaning of what I'm saying?
But sir, again, a conversation or a dialogue occurs in a context always, and it obviously the word may represent a definite meaning, but it changes according to the context as well. So yeah.
Very interesting. And this is quite a Bakhtinian position that you have. But there is this there is a historical debate between analytical and continental philosophy just around this, that what is the meaning. So many philosophers in the analytical tradition try to reduce language to logic, to mathematics, and that is where continental thinkers like Kierkegaard or Heidegger or Bakhtin or Gadamer, they question this reductionist attempt to reduce language to logic, because for them dialogue happens through language, and language is lived. It's not reified. It's not formulated in a formulae, so to speak. Very interesting. Someone has written to reach middle ground on issues where parties have opposing opinion, needs, and wants. Nadia. So, but what if even after, say, a discussion of about 2 hours, there is no middle ground which has been achieved? Would we call those 2 hours as dialogue or not? Anyone? Or Jishan, what if someone has entered into a conversation with the belief that I know the truth, the ultimate truth, and from that position that person is debating with you? Is there any possibility of that interaction becoming a dialogue if there is no change in the person or person's position?
So in that sense, the end person is already entering with a conclusion of the dialogue. So a dialogue is like exchanges where the concept has a vulnerability. But when you are already molded with that kind of conception, you already have that belief, then you are not just dialoguing, you are just either defending or you are propagating your own knowledge.
Very interesting. But then, are we saying that openness is a prerequisite to have dialogue? Or humility is a prerequisite to have dialogue? Or an epistemological want and a need to know more a prerequisite to dialogue? And my questions are for everyone, not just for the person who has responded. Yeah, please.
I think sometimes, people enter a dialogue thinking that, enter space thinking that, okay, I'm going to prove my point. But depending on how the environment there is, they might actually become open. So the very fact that they're entering is very important. It's like we sometimes go to a restaurant, we are not hungry, we look at the menu and we're suddenly hungry. So sometimes that happens. So the very fact, it should be appreciated that they are at least talking.
Yeah, at least they are coming to the table. Okay. Still, the prerequisite that you have is the hope that the person may become open or the person may change. So even that hope is a prerequisite. So why I focus on these issues? See, I teach students who are going to be teachers. And they always ask me, how do I do it in my class? How do I do dialogue in my class? So they often ask me, sir, what is the prerequisite? Are there any? Or when we say, or in other words, how can we ensure that dialogue happens? Can we ensure it? Yes, Sakshi.
Sir, I believe that the only prerequisite that we can see, or personally I can see, that not waiting for any conclusion, not waiting for any answer to be brought from any dialogue, from any conversation that people or a group of class is having. So in that way, I guess we can have very different ways to have a conversation, different ideas to come with no exact goal, and in an unconscious mind to achieve.
Okay, but then how about mathematics? How about, say, Pythagoras theorem? So if I have to teach them, can there be multiplicity of responses in these topics as compared to, say, democracy? So would the possibilities of dialogue change with the change in topic that is going to be discussed?
Maybe so. It definitely will have an impact on it. But the thing is, we can still have different ways to solve a Pythagoras theory. It might not be the correct way if we have an open sense, if we don't have any end point to reach over there, or if we are not having or keeping that figure in a mind that it is pure and the only not impactful thing that we not need to achieve over there. So I guess we can have different methods over there. Then we can question other people also over there.
Maybe, yeah. Anyone else who wants to say something? Unes has written that dialogue is to get to know each other without prejudices. But again, someone can say that when we speak of a context, then the context itself is something that prejudices us. It's a baggage. It makes us biased. Yep, Pushpika.
Sir, I really think that that openness is a prerequisite of to have a dialogue, really have a dialogue. For example, the way you started this session. So you started instead of just telling what you know, you're asking to us. So and also we know that we are here to learn. So I think we both share that openness. That okay, since he is the person who's going to teach us, he is having this much of experience. Yet there is a possibility that there's a comfort that yes, we can exchange things. Not just we are here to listen or to understand. We are here to share. So I think openness is a very important prerequisite. Yeah.
Okay, great. So some Pushpika is arriving at a different position. Great. So, this is the way we arrive at our own positions, which are unique to our belief systems. And as a teacher educator, I believe that is what we should do. We should the idea of teaching is to enable learners to have their own rationally arguable or rationally thought out positions. Yes, Jishan.
So I had just one question. Can we not say that exchange between two people can be a dialogue, even if one individual has that humility that I have limitation in my knowledge, even though the one person is radical, another person is totally radical in their viewpoint? Can we say that even if one person has that epistemic humility, then the dialogue is happening?
It's very interesting, Zishan. And, many people have taken this position in the past. But let me give you certain examples. So one is the famous idea that, someone slapped Gandhiji and he says that, I present to you my other cheek. And if you want to slap me again, please slap me again. That's one idea. Second is this whole notion of post-truth and propaganda. That imagine you have switched on the TV to watch news and you are open to knowing about the world. But what you are getting out of the news these days, it's not news, it's more to do with how we present a news. So would that interaction where you are open and the other person is saying something, would that be dialogical? Or in another position where a student has come to a school to learn, and the curriculum of the school has been designed to promote a particular way of thinking. The teachers have been hired who believe in that particular thinking. The children of only those parents are admitted to the school who believe in that particular way of thinking. Then no matter how epistemically open this child is, do you think he will ever be able to develop the ability to have a political dialogue? So these are the classic cases where we differentiate education with propaganda, education with indoctrination, education with conditioning. And coming back to Gandhi's example, can there be dialogue in a hierarchical relationship? This is a major question that I'm posing to you next. Can there be dialogue between people who are at different levels of hierarchy or who have a power differential? Think about it. Any views?
Could you repeat the question, maybe, Professor?
Can there be dialogue between people in a hierarchical relationship?
I might just be wrong, but I'm just taking a go at it. My idea is if a person is lower in a hierarchical position in some way, it's not necessary that they might not have any power at all. They might be powerful in some other way. And I think the very conviction that you have in your own the very confidence you have in your own convictions gives you a certain amount of power. And non-violence again is it was a tool that has helped a lot in equalizing these power equations, and that's when it's not perfect, it's not going to be smooth, but it's a beginning.
Very interesting. Again, connecting it to the idea of being hopeful. I think that is another foundation that is emerging here, that hope is necessary for dialogue. And I mean, obviously, Gandhi and Paulo Freire would agree with your position that even though there are people who are oppressed and there are people who are oppressors, still there has to be a dialogue. There has to be a sort of not just negotiation, but a quest for a different way of life. And that is where the ontological assumptions about who a human being is becomes important. So for people like Freire and Dalai Lama, the compassionate, humane, loving aspect of human beings is their essence. So if someone who believes that humans are social beings or rational animals, for them this hope may not be there. So how we decide, or how rather how we accept a human being to be, will take us to a different idea of dialogue. So for example, if you understand human beings are essentially construed by their socio-political reality, then your dialogue will be socio-political. You won't be able to think beyond the socio-political negotiations. And this is the exact point where Freire goes way ahead than any neo-Marxist thinker, because he makes love the essential of being human, not just labor. And that is why I compare Freire with Dalai Lama. But again, I mean, having this idea that love is the essence of human being, and saying that spirituality is the essence of human being, if you believe in spirituality, they will take you to different ideas of dialogue. So one aspect which I will highlight while discussing a dialogue or any other topic for that matter is some sort of conceptual clarity and a quest to find coherence, that which assumption leads to which conclusion. Okay, Furqan, please go ahead.
Yeah, I was just gonna say about the previous question. I think it's also about the placing yourself in a right position to have a successful dialogue. Because I was like reading a story about the Mevlana Jalaluddin Rumi's life, and he was in Konya, and there's a short story, and Shams Tabrizi, he came to visit him. And the first side, he wanted to ask him a question, but Mevlana was on his horse, and he asked, if I can ask you a question, and Mevlana said, yes, you can. And then he replied, but you have to be in the same level like me on the ground. I cannot ask you like that, because you're on the higher level, and this actually makes our dialogue worse. He wanted to have a perfect dialogue with Mevlana, and he actually proposed to have a equal level with him. That's why it's also about placing yourself in the right position to be a neutral, to be out of any condition, because in that position also Mevlana had a lot of followers around him, and they were supporting him, and it's not a perfect dialogue again. You need to be neutral to have this, also to learn from this dialogue.
True. And this is exactly a debate that happened between Martin Buber and Gandhi. So Gandhi wrote a letter to the Jews, saying that if the Germans are trying to kill you, then you should offer yourself to be killed by them, so that their conscience is emerged. I don't know the exact wording, but this is what I got from the letter. And Buber responds to this. He says that, Mahatma, you can say this because you are in a place where your existence, the sheer existence, is not at the stake. Here, if we offer ourselves like that, then there will be no one to resist anymore after some time. So, this whole idea that what can initiate a dialogue. Gandhi might say that armed resistance can never initiate a dialogue. But for Buber, since the question is of their sheer existence, then yes, that sort of resistance and assertion of your power and then getting onto a dialogue probably was the right way. And again, the king who steps down from the horse is still a king. But this gesture of making someone step down from a horse is to bring a psychological humility. So what I also hear in your words, Furqan, is that sort of intellectual humility in a person who is at a higher level or at a higher pedestal can still initiate or promote dialogue. But yes, you may have to assert that sort of equality and that sort of some sense of similarity and commonality. So what I also hear is that there have to be some common grounds on which a dialogue can be initiated. Am I right in assuming this? Okay. Anyone else? Yes, Nadia.
So since Furqan has just said that you have to place yourself in the right position, and like you just said that you need to find the common ground. Now I would say that I do agree with Pushpika when she says that you need to basically humility has to be a prerequisite. So you have to be open. So now going back to that earlier question, I'd say it is a prerequisite.
Good. Keep thinking, because you will go back to many questions as our discussion will progress. But good that you are formulating your position here. Anyone else? Okay, so let me move on to the next question. So how do we think about this person, this participant with whom we are trying to have a dialogue? Who is this person? How do we theorize this second party in dialogue? Yes, Ravi. Ravi, please go ahead. Anyone else? I don't know if Ravi is able to hear me or not.
Yes, sir.
Please go ahead.
Sir, as we discussed that for a dialogue, a particular ground is needed, an equal ground is needed. In that same way, a dialogue should be always so that a win-win situation can be created for both the parties in the dialogue. Because if there is not a win-win situation, I mean an equal situation for both to win it or a satisfaction, then for that dialogue is of no use. It will come to a zero.
Very interesting. So again, you are taking us back to this idea of negotiation. So just to question you, who is going to win in our discussion?
No one, sir. No, not a winner, but a particular ground where both the ideas can be created and both should be entertained. I mean, there should not be that I am a big brother of yours and I am going to dominate you. So that's a scenario should be created.
So this idea of win-win, I mean, again, it has its counterpoint, which is lose-lose or win-lose. So this sort of decision, they're very difficult in a dialogue, because how the situation has unfolded. Okay, let me put this in another way. You must have heard stories about, someone who is losing and who is on the ground and who is fed up of life, and then listening to some idea or listening to some thought, that person changed himself or herself. Now the other person may not even know that their words has changed you. Now, in this situation, can we say that dialogue has happened? For example, you and I are having this discussion. I don't know what is going on in your mind. I don't know whether you are experiencing this conversation as a dialogue or just some random discussion or some chit chat. And I don't know that if discussing these ideas are bringing some radical change in you as a person. So how can I say at the end whether this was a win-win situation or zero and win situation or loss of time and win situation? Let me put this in still another way. If you and I are talking and if a third party is observing from outside, can that person say that what is happening between us is dialogue or not? Of course, that person can say that a conversation is going on. And let me just elaborate on this. Say you are talking to people in a group and you feel that, wow, this conversation with this person is going so well. And someone else pitches in and changes the of the whole discussion. And you feel a certain pang. I don't know why has this been changed? Now that's your subjective experience. You may say that the dialogue was going on, but that person who pitched in didn't know. So who can claim that something was a dialogue or not? And this is for everyone, not just Ravi. Yes, Pushpika, please go ahead.
So I think in that case, the one who's really seeking to learn something, or who's very much actively trying to participate in that conversation, is the one who would say that whether he or she got something, or who, and that person would feel that pang, as you said. So the one, I think, who's very much actively seeking out something in a dialogue is the one who would feel that pang.
Yeah, and Pragya, when you say that it started an internal dialogue, then how can we say that a situation was win-win situation or not? I mean, so what I'm trying to focus here, Jishan and others, is that when we use these words around a particular phenomena, around a particular experience, then they influence the way we think of that phenomena. So we have to be really careful about how we theorize it, how we articulate it. So for example, moving to Pragya's point, what is this internal dialogue? I mean, is there a second party in this internal dialogue?
I think we can have whole conflicting views within ourselves, and sometimes or no views at all, and sometimes it's just a back and forth thing we are playing. And I just have another question. Is it possible that two people enter a dialogue and only one walks out having had a dialogue, like something like that, like the other person is still stuck? And I think that could also be possible. I don't know, I'm just
but then saying that, okay, so let me ask a more fundamental question. Do we enter into a dialogue, or do we make dialogue happen? So for example, I began that this is a conversation and it may or may not become a dialogue. So the belief that, or the supposition that I have is that we enter into conversations, and then the nature of conversation may change. It may become a debate, it may become a dialogue, it may become an argument or something else. So when we entered into a conversation, and one person might have had experienced it as a dialogue, then that, I mean, and for the other person it was just a conversation. So what?
Then do we like focus on the journey, and like somebody commented just now, like we focus on the journey and not the results?
See, most of you are focusing on the journey. When you talk about openness, when you talk about flexibility, when you talk about epistemic humility, when you talk about hope, when you talk about change, when you talk about learning, it's all a journey. So let me ask the other way around, Unes. Aren't results necessary? Yes, Furkan.
I was just gonna add the previous one we were talking about. I think it's also about our inner conscience when we are having a dialogue, because if we talk about the internal dialogue, and I think internal dialogue is happening between us and our inner conscience, and we are actually hearing something new, and we are actually testing in our inner conscience, and we are deciding if he's talking about the right things, if he can have a right, but if we have a access to our inner conscience, and some people don't have it, and that's why it's also one of the priority to have a perfect dialogue. We have to have an access to our inner conscience. Why I'm saying this, because we see all the politicians are having a debate. Sometimes they are talking about the dialogue, but they are all actually insisting on our ideas, and they don't even check themselves in their inner conscience. They're just proposing their ideas, what they already believe, but they don't learn anything else. They don't actually respect the others, and they don't even test themselves if the other one saying the truth or just doing a bullshit.
I totally agree with you here. So what you have beautifully brought out is the ethical dimension of dialogue. Right till now, we were focusing only on the epistemological, knowing, learning, being open, getting new perspectives, understanding new positions. But again, this ethical dimension where there are multiple ideas of right and wrong, and which most often is the case for any political debate or any any argument or any fight, is this idea of right and wrong, where I am right and the other person is wrong. So can we say that not just epistemological humility, but also an ethical normative openness, and this idea that both of us can be right at the same time and both of us can be wrong at the same time? So acknowledging the fluidity and the non-finality of our judgments, that is also involved in dialogue. For example, yeah, please go ahead.
Every dialogue ends with some results. There is no dialogue without a result. Result can be positive, negative. It can also end with indifference. So I don't think we can have a dialogue without any result.
What about my dialogue with my pet? Or let me put it differently. Can I have dialogue with pet? Can I have dialogue with the sea? Can I have dialogue with trees? Can I have dialogue with the stuffed toy that I have had since childhood? Can I have dialogue in silence?
Yes.
Then what do we do with your
But then
thing?
it makes an impact. It makes an impact in me. Maybe my understanding changes from my dialogue of with whom I dialogue. So there is a change, there is a result in my dialogue.
Yeah, there is a result, but is dialogue a choice, or does it happen to us? Buber calls it encounter.
It happens. It happens actually. We don't choose to dialogue, but it happens most of the times.
Then how can we have a dialogical class, or how can we have a political dialogue if it happens to us and we can't make it?
I think dialogue doesn't happen with everybody. You need to create that DNA, as in it won't happen with everybody unless you are. So if you're a dialogic person, then you will have more dialogues than somebody who is less who is close. That close person might still have a dialogue because you cannot be completely closed. I think that is just not possible. We are human beings, but I think it's just the more you create the DNA, the more you will have. You learn to create the environment. I am just assuming that's why we're having the class.
But then if a person engages in more conversations, does that mean that the quality of conversations is better?
No.
Then, and what about dialogue with bots? Think. Yes, Furkan.
I think it's also about preparing yourself that you're going to have a dialogue, because like what we are doing here, like we are kind of the type of the educational dialogue, right? Because in this kind of dialogue, we can be all right, because we talk about dialogue and we all know a bit about dialogue, and we know about like what you're saying is already connected to dialogue, and that's why we are learning from it. But if if we take someone from the outside, from the street, and he doesn't know anything about dialogue, he doesn't need a dialogue, he doesn't value the dialogue, and we try to have a dialogue with him, and whatever we said, anything to him, he's gonna probably resist to accept because we are actually foreigner to him, and he's not ready to have a dialogue. He's not prepared to have a dialogue. But in a class like this, or any class, the teacher is coming and the topic is already clear and the students are coming. And also in a, let's say, intercultural dialogue, we are organizing the activity, and the French culture and the Italian culture comes together, and they're actually prepared to accept each other because they are already preparing themselves, let's say, in 1 week in advance or 1 month in advance. But it's also about preparing yourself, I mean, to have a perfect dialogue or to have a win-win situation. You cannot have a dialogue with anyone, but you have to have someone who can have a dialogue, who can prepare themselves to have a dialogue, I think.
Yeah, and you know, your points, I accept them completely as long as the other person is articulating. What about, say, Andrew or Mahada or Sabah or Pal or Anirudh or Rocky Bull or I've heard from Behzad, obviously. So what about all these people from whom I haven't heard till now? How do I know whether I'm having dialogue with them or not? Or how do I know that they are having dialogue with all of us or not?
So dialogue can be at different level. Sometimes we don't express in words, but then the dialogue happens.
Yeah.
Is it not?
It's also about being silent. When you're actually silent, you're accepting what we are talking about. This is also another rule, that if you're in the atmosphere and if people speaks and you're silent, you have to say something if you oppose. That's why you are also having a dialogue. You're accepting in yourself, like we talk about inner conscience. You're checking with them, and you have to speak or you accept.
But do you realize the ephemeral nature of this idea of dialogue? That it may happen to me, I may not even realize that it happened to me, and I thought that I was in dialogue, but I was not. I wanted to be there so badly, but I couldn't. I did not want it at all, but it just happened. Encounter. And I think I was not ready for it at that time. And watching this recording, say after 3 years, oh wow, or oh wow. Do you realize the fluidity here?
Sir, can there be any dialogue in silence?
Again, I mean, how do we understand silence? So, for example, Krishnamurti
No,
would
like one person is silent and the other person is speaking.
But then there is no silence. I mean, there is clearly a conversation or some interaction going on. Except if one person is speaking in French and the other person only knows Hindi. That's a different scenario. But yes, even still there, I mean, can there be dialogue between people who don't share a language? If there can be a dialogue between a human being and a pet, then I'm sure this can also be possible between people who don't even share a language.
Body language we have.
Yep, body language. Yeah. But then also, where is this other located with whom we are trying to have a dialogue? When we say silence, and I was referring to Krishnamurti will tell you that if you are trying to have a dialogue, you will not have it. Because you are constantly in your chain of thoughts. And when you are in your chain of thought and in your chain of ideas, then you are still stuck in your head. And to have a genuine dialogue, you have to step back, you have to silence your mind and be a witness. And then it will happen. Someone like Freire or Kazipides would reject this. Then we would say, no, then the other is inside of us. Like, say, Carl Jung would talk about self and shadow and anima and animus. That we internalize other people and then we have dialogue with ourselves. But that's not the silence that Krishnamurti talks about. Yes, Pragya. Please elaborate on this, what you just wrote.
Well, it just means that sometimes you feel so comfortable with a person that you don't need to have a conversation, and yet in their presence you are sort of having a dialogue with your own self, and that space is created. So and then it's sort of you are soundboarding with your own self, and maybe they are with their own selves as well, because of how comfortable you are in their presence. And then you walk away and suddenly the things are clearer because you've sort of done that soundboarding.
In psychoanalysis, it is said that you are really alone in the presence of the other. So that otherness, when it is totally present and when you are totally there, then this sort of mind state happens. Any other thought? Nadia, please go ahead.
Nothing, sir. I just thought that maybe dialogue, after hearing everything, dialogue is less about actually having a conversation and more about how you engage with everything. So, say you asked us whether we can have dialogue with the surroundings, with the sea. I think it's just the way that you engage with the sea. And then you asked also about the people who are not speaking up in class. Are we having a dialogue with them? I would say yes, because they are still engaging with us in some way. We are engaging with them.
Yeah, but then the question that comes to my mind is, can institutions be dialogic? I mean, we have so many institutions for interreligious dialogue and everything. And if dialogue cannot be made possible?
So I think by the kind of opinions you have, or the kind of, say, rules and regulations, even that is a form of dialogue. You're putting your point across and you're saying, this is what I stand for. And then, if you have something to change or whatever, then, we talk about it. So I think that in some way that there is dialogue in that sense too.
Okay.
So we can never have a dialogue between institutes, but then dialogues are always between people who are part of the institutes.
So that's my point, that can an institution, I'm not saying dialogue between two institutions, but can we say that we are an institution which is dialogical? So any for example, any civil society organization, any NGO, or any educational institution,
I think by the very fact, if there is if there's less hierarchy in the institution itself, that creates a environment for dialogue. So I don't know, that could be one step.
But you said that hierarchy doesn't matter if we have intellectual humility.
No, I didn't say it didn't matter. I said it makes it more smooth to have a dialogue if there is more equality. I'm not saying it's an impossible thing if you can't have a dialogue. It makes it more difficult if there is no hierarchy. So let's say a lot of in when I started working, we suddenly had these. I think in 2007 we suddenly moved on to these organizations which had or even the managers, and you could walk in without knocking. Again, that was on paper. We still were expected to knock and take right to them before, but they started with all this nonsense just to show that we are more open, we are more the word dialogic was not used, but we have a flat hierarchy, even though it was still there. So they started with all this jazz. So that is one way to actually put it in practice. Of course, that they were not successful, but it attracted us to those kind of companies compared to typical government ones as youth.
So now another important prerequisite that you are bringing up is the value of equality, and you may add freedom to it, freedom to speak. So you are adding more to what is required to have dialogue. Let's think more about this. Come on. Anyone on this who doesn't believe that equality or freedom are necessary to have dialogue?
So I think by the very fact of saying dialogue, we go for equality and freedom. So it does not exclude freedom and equality from dialogue. So the very fact it implies that there is equality and freedom is because of that we come together.
Yeah, but Arukya, if something by definition doesn't exclude it, then by definition it also doesn't include it. Yes, Ravi.
I think that there should always be equality, a common ground for both the parties to have a dialogue. And sir, as we were going back to all the discussions we had, I can say that dialogue is always a multidimensional, a multidirectional, and on a common ground. Sir, if we are taking about the delegates or about a conflict place, there is a conflict going on. So that dialogue will be a totally different from the dialogue which we are going to have with our pet or with the sky or inner self. So, sir, if we are having a delegates dialogue, so then why there are for example, if you take a 6-day war in Israel between Israel and the Arab worlds, after that, many kind of their dialogues happened and that failed for many a times. And it's now also, this is also time where they are failing at many parts. So why are these dialogues failing? If both the parties are on equal ground, if they are thinking that, yes, this is a country we should recognize, we have to do a business with them, then why these dialogues are failing?
But are they really dialogue, or are they mere conversations or negotiations?
They are negotiations, but
we need to differentiate between these. That where are we just naming something dialogue, or where we are genuinely having dialogue? Because again, so what comes to my mind is that, you know, this idea of dialogue was never important in the past. It was not so important. But now, since it has become important, it indicates that we feel a lack of dialogue. So an idea becomes important when it is required, when its necessity is accepted by people. So even though Faiz has said, as Pragya written, that bol ke lab azad hai tere, that you are free to speak, but then raising your voice is not equal to dialogue. So what is required to transform raising of your voice into having a dialogue was what we started with. Yes, Jishan.
So what I wanted to say that freedom and all of these things may not necessitate dialogue, in the sense that, for instance, we talk about institutes like schooling or a relationship, a pedagogical relationship between a teacher and a student. So when I am becoming a student, then means I am being aware that I will relinquish something of my right in order to achieve something from that professor or teacher who has a higher authority, at a higher hierarchy. There is a dialogue. There is a dialogue between teacher and student, even though teacher is superior in terms of relations, virtues than a student, and student comes with a consent that, yes, if I do lack in capability in making a dialogue, then the person as authority has full right to evaluate me and even punish me.
Well, I will not go to the extent of punishment, but yeah, the rest of the thing, as Pushpika has written, that it is the intent that matters. But again, if there is a conflict between the student's position and the teacher's position, then what? And what is the role of a teacher? Is the role of the teacher to, so to say, transact or transfer certain facts, opinion, and knowledge? Or is it to, as Hurst would say, it is to initiate a student into a process of learning? Is it to promote the rational abilities of the child, or is it to give direction to those abilities?
So the second one.
What second?
So the rational development, pushing the boundary of rational development of a child. I think.
Why is reason important? Why can't we just be happy with transfer of facts and information and beliefs?
So then it would be already, in a kind of a prejudice form, because the teacher is already in a content. They are learning things according to their way. So if they are transferring a fact, they will transfer it in their own way. They won't open the space to question it or to to improve it or to have any other things into it, to add any other things into it. And so.
Yeah. So then, what should be the teacher's judgment be about?
So I had just.
Yeah, Dishan.
So what I believe that even if we are talking about teachers, then education system is very intricate in that matter. Like if you are saying that there should be an openness, like we should be directing their curiosity rather than hooking into some place. But again, our endeavor for making a progressive endeavor, it must start from a point, right? It means even an early intervention of a student, curiosity, unhinged curiosity may lead to some other different thing, may lead to the learning of antagonistic thing. So, like in early intervention of education, it is very much clear that teacher focuses on fact-based learning because they want to hook their understanding so that they do not like meander. They do not wander here and there.
But why is wandering or wondering so bad? And when we say children are curious, aren't they curious about right and wrong? And if we initiate them into facts, then how would they develop the ability to judge between right and wrong? And when we, even when the child is, basically an infant, right there we start telling the child this is right and this is not. Then the most obvious question of the child would be why? And if we limit the child to the facts, we are basically suppressing the why. And no value or no ethical position can come from facts. This is the Humean position that you cannot arrive at shoulds from what is. So if we do this, then we are basically telling the child to be socialized into particular ways of judgment. Isn't that what the school counters? The kind of right and wrong that we learn at home. The school is supposed to refine it. That is why when we talk about educational theory, we say that it is essentially normative. It's not without norms or values. Yes, Furqan.
I was just going to add about this teacher-student dialogue. It's also about the teacher, like is a primary school teacher or the secondary or the high school or the professor at the university or the PhD class. It all goes like more free and give the teachers, professors give them more freedom. And it's becoming a better dialogue, and they're also, finding a better truth, ultimate versions of truth. But when we talk about the secondary or the primary school teacher and the students, even if the student is Einstein, the teacher is not going to let him speak or listen him, because it's all about the basics. And the basics, actually, we are accepting all this, like as a society and as an educational system, and we give them like as a must thing. This is the truth, and we all have to learn it. And even if the student says 2 + 2 is 5, the students will never accept, and also the teacher will never accept it. It's all about also the time and also your age, also your position where you are now. And also it's about the freedom that actually the atmosphere gives us to speak, and also, clarify our positions.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Okay.
But how will the teacher ever know, that this is because they themselves have been brought up in a system. They are the products of a system wherein there is no dialogue. So they do not not no dialogue, but between a teacher student, they've gone through a certain system. How would they know there is an alternative way of education than what they have learned?
Yeah, then you would have to hope that there is at least one such experience of dialogue that the students have had, to have that sort of imagination. I totally get this point of yours, because when we are when I teach future teachers, pupil teachers, then they often are not able to imagine a class which is not conventional, and that is where I try my best to show them an alternative pedagogical stance which can stimulate their imagination to find their own ways. Yes, Pal, go ahead.
Hello, sir. This is Pal actually. Many of you get confused because of the spelling. And exactly your point, I wanted to say, well, the children, they are conditioned that way. I mean, since beginning, they are taught that, okay, you have to behave in certain ways. And then even if somebody is willing to, go in a different direction or path, but they fear the teacher or that elderly figure because of the conditioning, of course, that you are supposed to respect your teacher, and sometimes a teacher take it in a way, they take it personally, and that's why then the children who are willing, who are curious, they shut themselves down, and that's, I'm speaking to my personal experience, I would say.
I totally agree. I totally agree. So then the question that pops up in my head is that, can we have dialogue in a culture which is not dialogical? A culture which is about monologues, one person speaking and expecting everyone to listen, one leader following and one leader leading and expecting everyone to follow, or one voice being the dominant and expecting all the marginalized voices to be silent. So what kind of culture this is, and can such a culture promote genuine dialogue?
Dialogue in such a culture is seen as an act of rebellion, even if you try and no matter how you put things, how you voice yourself, it's seen as an act of rebellion. It's seen as it's seen as UAPA, for example, in current.
Then act of rebellion are, and I mean, then they have an ethical ground. So dialogue, even though it is so ephemeral and fluid and in the air, it has major implications in the way we live our life. And again, then coming back to the idea of freedom and equality and justice. I mean, then if we have to talk about public action, or if we have to talk about advocacy, and I'm coming back to your context of interreligious, interfaith dialogue, then we have to theorize our acts in consonance with these values. That is how we make our case for dialogue. And that is how we condemn an act which subverts dialogue. So, Bakhtin's carnival is not just celebration of plurality mindlessly. It's an imbibed sense of plurality, which is expressed in physical actions, but which is there in our way of being. So that way, dialogue has a very strong ethical underpinnings and implications.
It's also about having a dialogue and also creating something, right, from this dialogue. Because we talk about the education system, and we generally see that the best education system now these days in Finland. And in Finland, actually, what I see, the teachers actually give them more space for the students. They don't give give them a homework, the school hours are less, and they're more actually having a practical educations, and like demanding from them to put something on the table. But on the other side, like we talk about the atmosphere which we cannot have a dialogue. We are just repeating what they are actually pushing us to learn. And it's also,
I totally agree with you. And I have been to a couple of seminars and conferences where people from one was a technology conference where people from Finland came with all sorts of software and everything. And I asked them, is your software customized to a class with 30, 40, 60 students? And they have no answers. I mean, having 15 students in a class and having 35 students in a class is a phenomenal difference. Let me tell you, in some of my papers, I mean, we have a lot of optional papers. Sometimes I get 5, 6, 10 students out of 60 because there are many optionals. And we have superb discussions and dialogue in those sessions. I cannot have, I mean, this is actually the number of students right in this group is my average class size. This is the most that I can do.
Actually, like you said, it's also about the quantity of the people. I mean, quantity of the people in the atmosphere that we are having a dialogue. Because in the better schools, like I just gave an example as a Finland, but it's also in every country. Like as a better schools, better universities, there are less students, and the professors and the teachers are having a more dialogue with those students. And it's actually, like we all said in the beginning, the finding the ultimate version of the knowledge. And we can actually have that ultimate version of the knowledge only with the dialogue as much as possible in that atmosphere. But like you said, in the school, in the classroom with the 50 students, like who is going to have a dialogue with the teacher or the professor? And it's generally just listening, and it's not even dialogue. Of course, it's kind of bit dialogue, but not a perfect dialogue. That's why it's also, yeah, like you said, quantity. Yeah.
So the whole, I mean, that is why I asked this question, can institutions be dialogic? Because the way we envision an institution, so for example, envision a classroom. In Finland, there is one imagination. In Delhi government schools, there is another imagination. And in alternative schools like Krishnamurti School or Aurobindo School, there is another imagination. And the kind of space that you will feel in these institutions will be different. What kind of thing can you talk about? What kind of opinions are given space? So, and I mean, generally we understand institutions as people collective. But I mean, I have come to this understanding that rather than being a collective of people, it's the relationship of people that defines an institution. So it's not just how many people have come together. It's not just that. It's how these people are able to relate with each other, how they are able to engage with each other. I have seen batches where students were very bright, but they did not have any communication with each other, and they did not learn from each other. And a batch where students may not have had a lot of background in philosophy or other disciplines, but they had collegiality, they had fraternity, sense of being together, and they came together and learned from each other. So, and this is exactly the kind of thing, this the idea of a learning community that we undermine in our educational system, that learners can learn from each other. Yeah, something like that, Pragya. People coming together, having each other's back. So dialogue in that sense, if you were to interpret it in an expansive manner, will demand you to live a dialogical life, not just to have a dialogue or not just to experience a dialogue. And that's a big responsibility. How many of you are able to feel the burden of this responsibility?
Sir, what are the basic precepts of this dialogical life?
I don't know. That's for you to figure out for your own life.
Sir, from your proposition, I understand the whole life becomes a dialogue. It happens at every moment.
That's the aspire. That's what the aspiration should be. No? Otherwise, there will be a lot of incoherence and contradiction in our actions. Then we would be dialogical with our students, but not with our wives or husbands. Then we'll be dialogical with our fellow citizens, but not for people abroad. That was the exact point where Tagore critiques Gandhi's nationalism in the favor of internationalism. Tagore's quest is for a universal human being, not just a citizen.
I'm not sure if this kind of a dialogic life is a burden. I think if we can adapt it, then it'll make things. It'll make us feel much lighter, and it'll make us freer. Otherwise, we're just in our own boundaries of our own mind. So I'm not very sure if this is a burden. It might be difficult to imbibe this life and a whole, but I think once you have done it to a certain degree, it will make you feel much better.
Mm-hmm.
Isn't it also breaking your taboos and opening yourself to the world and listening others and also accepting other values? And it's what you're saying is responsibility is actually this, if I understood correctly. And also, in order to do that, you have to leave your values a bit, behind. Of course, you're not abandoning them, but keeping them in somewhere and opening a new spaces for the others and the other values and the ideas. But it's also really hard to do it like throughout all our life, and that's probably possible for very few people in this world. We can only see and learn the way that we can go, but it's hard to be on that road until the end.
Yes, that is what I'm saying. And also I must add here, it's not saying that there is no truth or there is no right. It's not, this position will take us to relativism, that no one is right and no perspective is useful. So what's the point? And if nothing is right or wrong, then I should do whatever I want to do. It's saying that, yes, there are certain things which are right. There are certain things which are wrong. And yes, I don't know perfectly what they are, but yes, I'm trying to find some universal idea of right or wrong, with which I can live my life.
I have just a small personal example to share about this dialogic life part of things. So I work for India-Pakistan peace, and when I started to know, started to get to know Pakistani. So one of the things I found extremely, I would say, I have a lot of aversion for was they have inter-family marriages. So when I was discussing it with one of my friends, and I said, family tree, and their family tree is actually a family web. There's so much of within the family marriages, and for us, because even though I'm an atheist, I was because for us, our cousins are like bhaiya, didi. We don't even, in Hinduism, we don't even have a name for cousin. It's the whole concept of joint family. And so, I found it really horrible. But then one of another atheist friends said that, you support LGBTQIA, you're somebody who supports, something which is totally out of, the norms. Then how can you judge somebody who's having a family web, for example? And that was just this eye-opening statement. And for me, and then I started thinking, okay, why do people? Because I didn't even see that too much in India, even in other communities. So then I started thinking, okay, what are the advantages? And one of the first things I thought is, okay, if my niece tomorrow marries my son, or vice versa, or something like that, I will not, there's going to be a comfort. There's not going to be an outsider coming to my family, and it's going to be okay. So I could see their point of view, that I still don't agree. And I mean, I would still, so now my whole point is that, okay, people should be made aware of the genetic issues that happen. And it's after that, it's their choice, because if two disabled people decide to get married knowing that there could be issues, then why can't two people who could have a genetic issue child? It's a choice. They should be given the information, and it's a choice, and we have to respect that. So I think this is again a very personal example of how it just how the entire way I saw things changed.
Thank you for sharing that, Pragya. And yes, that is what I mean, having that coherence between, Carl Rogers used to say that a healthy individual is one whose thinking, feeling, and behavior are in sync with each other. And existentialists took this idea even further, that it is the being that we are talking about. We can't even divide the being into thinking, feeling, and behavior. So the being dialogical, I mean, it requires every ounce of your body, mind, and everything, whatever you believe in, to be put into action. Yeah. Any other thought, musing, question?
So, sir, can we say that this dialoguing is something that, instead of making it our trait or one of the quality, we should make it our virtue?
Maybe. Then we have to go into the idea of virtues, what virtues are, and whether dialogue can be a virtue or not. Or dialogue implies certain virtues like courage, like openness, like honesty, or genuineness, or authenticity. Yeah, but it's an interesting way to theorize dialogue itself as a virtue. Think more about it.
So may I ask, after this, right?
Sure.
So how do you think the concept of teacher and student, when we are talking about Plato and Aristotle, how do you put them into these category? Because Aristotle somehow has created his own opinion through a form of a criticism to his teacher Plato. And also the second question is, Aristotle tried to explain his own understanding of philosophy and understanding of society, everything, in a very dialogic way in starting of his period of explaining everything. So do you think that those dialogues are and ended on, like, no conversation can be added into that dialogue, or there is only one end and one explanation of those dialogue, how he's explaining?
So I don't know if I've heard you correctly, because your voice was a little, the volume was low. But what you are saying is that if a person, and I'm beginning with the second question, that if a person has a very clearly defined position, and then there is no change in that position, then would it be dialogue or not? Is that what you are saying?
No, sir. Sir, am I clear now?
Yes, better.
Yes, sir. So the question was, Aristotle tried to define his understanding of society in a dialogue. So do you think that those understanding or those dialogue and through which he was explaining, were they a stop end, or can we have any other understanding of those dialogue, or can we add our own value into also in those things?
Of course.
Or was it a very manipulative way of him using a dialogue to make people, manipulated and to make them not questioning him?
See, saying that someone is asking question only to manipulate others would be like accusing that person of knowing, and also, I mean, keeping that person in such a high pedestal that that person knows all the possible counterpoints and knows how to manipulate others. It's a bit too much to think of a person. But yes, sometimes while reading such dialogues, you may feel that he's playing with the other person, or he knows what the other person is saying. But then again, our questions come from our own positions. Whatever my understanding is, I'll ask my questions from that. And even while constructing knowledge, we have our own principles.
But if we are directed to construct
to
construct a knowledge in a very specific way, then how can we question it?
Then you can resist that way. You have to identify what that way is, and you have to question that way.
Okay. And if we can't recognize that we are actually in a system that is directing us to understand things in a particular way through dialogue only, then how can we know?
Yeah, so basically what you are saying is that can we be indoctrinated into dialogue?
Yeah, exactly, sir.
But then let me ask a parallel question. Can we be indoctrinated into democracy?
Definitely, sir.
How?
So it's a form. So ideas come
form
through dialogue.
Of governance, right? Yeah, but isn't being rational the essence of democracy?
It is, sir. It is.
That's it. You cannot force people to be rational. You can only force them to be irrational. If people are rational, then they are rational.
Okay, sir. Thank
you. Similarly, when we are trying to have a dialogue, then yes, sometimes it might happen that one person, like for example, sophists, that they had better ways of articulating things in a fancy way and to convince others. That doesn't mean that it's knowledge. That's the whole idea of post-truth, by the way. When we say that there is no truth and we are in an era of post-truth, basically what we are saying is that there is no truth. But then that's problematic. Because if we accept that there is no truth, then the person who is in power can do whatever he or she wants or they want.
Yes, sir.
So we need to save rationality in this time of extreme relativism.
Okay.
Yes, Pal.
Sir, I don't know whether this make any sense or not. I was just curious. So I've completed my master's in applied psychology, and then I was introduced to conflict management and social psychology. So then I got admitted in BHU and I was studying conflict management, and that's when I was introduced to, dialogue studies, and that's how I'm here today. So it's new for me also. I'm learning a lot every day and with all of the people around me. And most of the people here where I live, they don't know what dialogue is. And so my question here is that is it like I have to introduce dialogue to them or let them figure it out on their own? And if yes, then how can I do that?
So, Pal, the moment people start coming to you and telling you that, that it feels good to talk to you, or talking to you gives me so many insights, then you can tell them that this is dialogue. Before that, just try to have dialogue with them and see if they experience it or not.
Okay, so actually, like whenever I get this a lot, and then they assume by their own, okay, you are going to be a good counselor. Like we like talking to you. So this again, this I think dissonance comes in my mind when I mean, I am still trying to figure it out that how psychology, obviously psychology and dialogue will be going hand in hand. I'll be a counselor soon. I want to be a psychologist soon. So, I mean, I still am not able to make them understand things like this is dialogue. Like I tried, and maybe I'm using.
I totally get your point, and I have
Yeah.
also done my master's in clinical psychology.
Right. That's why I asked this.
Yeah. So what I have come to realize now is that even in education in my classes, that there is no point telling people. You cannot make them understand. They need to realize.
Yes, like we did, like I did, and other people did. Right.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, sir.
And then there is an additional responsibility on your part.
Okay.
That what you have realized, they may not realize the same thing. So you have to be open to what they have realized and how they have theorized it, or I mean, in basic terms, how they have made sense of it and how they are thinking about it. So don't get into making people realize about dialogue. I mean, it's like you are trying to make people be curious.
Yeah.
You can't. The assumption is that everyone is curious, and you can only give their curiosity some support and give them flight and space to explore and all that. Yeah.
Okay, so
All the best.
Thank you so much.
Yes.
I was just gonna say something about your previous discussion with Sakshi. I guess she was talking about the manipulation, and also you said the doctrination of something like, for example, democracy. And that's why I was like thinking it's again kind of connected to, like, we talk about the dialogue and also the perfect version of dialogue. And also to have a perfect version of dialogue, you have to have a same or similar level, or a similar educational level, like with the person who are dialoguing. Because with the person who is actually primary school graduated and PhD, whenever you have a dialogue, even if you want or you don't want, you are sometimes doctrinating something and also manipulating, because you know more than him in most cases. Of course, not everything. I'm not saying that primary school students or the graduate cannot teach anything or cannot know anything, but most of the time we are kind of doctrinating because we feel that we know more. And also most of the time, generally, PhD students more know than the primary school students graduated. And that's why the educational level is also important to be not to be manipulated in a dialogue, I guess.
So if you want to explore this idea further, I suggest that you learn more about this movement called philosophy for children. And they do philosophy with children. And there are documented dialogues of various philosophers with children. And in those while reading those dialogues, you will get a sense of how to engage with children in a way that does not impose your ideas on them. So it's a very interesting area of studies, philosophy for children. But overall, I still kind of disagree with this idea that a person who has more schooling is more educated. So we may have more degrees and we are more schooled, but we may actually be less educated.
I think it's like just a highly possibility that that person is doctrinating or manipulating the other person. That's what I was trying to say.
Possible. That's possible. Yeah. But that could be the other way around also. A person
or they might be.
Yeah. Pragya, go ahead. I think there's some network problem at her end. Pragya, you want to say
They could
something?
also be far removed. The more educated they become, they could be more far. So they could be more far removed from the ground realities.
Yes.
And become elitist.
Absolutely, that's possible. And also, when a person has not gotten an exposure of any institution, then the person may also be indoctrinatory because that person has only gotten socialized into a particular culture, and that person will promote that culture. So, I mean, saying either way will be too much to say. It won't be fair on part of either. Okay, so last question. And this is the most, I should say, baffling one, even, I mean, for me, definitely. I don't know if for you or not. Can we write dialogically? I mean, we all are into academics. We will be asked to write, we will be asked to speak. Can we write dialogically?
Sir, I think most of our writings are not dialogical. Including myself, I accept. Most of the time, we like to give our own opinions, our own informations, and there is no space for the informations of others, or no space for the other, I feel. So in that way, and most of the times, I feel that I am not dialogical in my writing.
Mm-hmm. Pragya, go ahead.
I think I'll go back to an article I read long ago when I was in school. Pros and cons, and usually they were connected. They were basically, they made you stop and think. What is important to you, and they brought out, I was in a non-biased manner. They brought out as if they were speaking for both. So I think it's possible. Again, if you mentioned earlier, if we live a dialogue, if a person who is most likely to going to be write dialogue.
But then again, and adding to Furqan's point also here, reference also here, having a literary dialogue between two characters and having dialogue with people, which is sort of transformatory and all that what we talked about, they are two different things. Having multiple voices in a text, that's one thing, but actually living it as a dialogue, I don't know how much comparison we can draw between the two.
Sir, can I say something?
Sure, go ahead.
Sir, I believe that the importance of dialogue, I think if any philosopher has worked on, I will believe the initiation was from Hegel. Hegel, somehow, maybe he was not talking entirely about the dialogue, but dialogue in the form of dialect. And he has presented a very well argument that how dialogical approach research is much better than any other in his preface to the phenomenology of spirit, where he talks about that how today's present discourses are more about defensive analysis of research rather than dialogical analysis, which comes from a multiple perspective. And they fall into the fallacy of one-sidedness when they do so.
Now, Jishan, just to take your thinking forward, in Hegel's idea, there is always a synthesis of two positions. And of course, there are new positions which always keep on coming up. But the idea is to merge these two positions, the self and the other. Now, people like Buber or Levinas, they would say that this is only dialectic, in which the radical otherness of the other is reduced, and even the selfhood is merged and negated. So these people, with a different assumption, of course, may say that this sense of self and sense of otherness, they should be kept alive, and that is a true idea of dialogue, where the otherness of the other is respected. So just something to think about. Yes, Furkan.
I was just gonna give another example about the writing dialogue. There was another sect of one book, maybe you heard about it, Stefan Zweig, I guess, and he was writing about the guy who plays chess with himself in a prison. And it's also about the writing a dialogue, because in that position, he has no one else in that room for 4 years, I guess, and he played on the ground, like with some little things, materials, chess. And he played different tactics. Like one side, he plays one tactic, and the other side in another tactic. And he knows, I don't know, maybe 100 tactics of the chess. And every play he enjoyed. But in order to enjoy every game or have a dialogue, maybe writing a dialogue, you have to know the others very well, others' positions very well, and you can put yourself on the other's position, and you can actually have a dialogue in yourself, or you write a dialogue instead of someone else, if I understood it correctly.
But even to enjoy this game of chess, where there is a genuine opposition from the other side, you need to lose. You need to be out of this knowledge of the other. If I already know all your moves in chess or in any other game, I'm going to win in any case. There is no real challenge there.
Kinda, yes. But also, to have a dialogue and writing it, it's really hard without knowing the other sides, right? That's why what I was.
There are multiple perspectives. These are writings with multiple perspectives, multiple positions. So is it that we engage with the text dialogically, no matter how it is written, or we write a text dialogical which leads to the reader having an experience of dialogue? For example, some of the Upanishadic stories, if you read them, a student is asking a question, a teacher is responding, but the position of the teacher is clear from the beginning. And at the end, the student is accepting that position of the teacher. Is that genuine dialogue? Or is it that the form of the writing is dialogical, where there are two or more characters involved, but the process is monological? I think I
and
must.
It seems we cannot writing. I mean, the writing form of dialogue. Like, is it true?
I don't know. I would leave you all with that probably to keep thinking. Any other anything that you want to say?
So,
Yeah.
what I'm thinking is, like, when it comes in the context of writing dialogically. So, like, for example, I'm writing something, right? Any story, and I'm writing in a form where there's a conversation between two people, two characters, right? Two or more characters. But since I'm the one who has made those characters, right? So the question answer or whatever is going between those two characters is coming from me, from one side, no? So, I mean, how come there's a possibility of dialogue? So it's like I'm writing and I'm having a dialogue within myself and I'm writing about it. I'm not
Yeah.
really sure
So,
how can we write in a dialogical manner.
a psychoanalyst would tell you that you don't know the otherness that is inside of you.
Okay. Mm,
Or
okay.
as a postmodernist might say, that the self is fragmented. So those alternative positions may come from those fragments.
The perfect example, hello? Yes, sir. The perfect example of Puspika's point of view is that Mahatma Gandhi's Hindu Swaraj, in which he has his own understanding of things, but he is presenting in a dialogic form, that he is dialoguing with the reader, and he is the editor. He is writing both point of views. Ultimately, he has the conclusion, but he is presenting in that way. It will not be called as a dialogue, I feel.
I don't know. I'm reserving my comments on all these. I want you all to keep thinking about them.
I was also reading about the person can have more self, like we have ourselves, and also it's generally we call them crazy people, but they have like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I think it goes to 7. They proved 7, I guess, and they can have a dialogue in themselves, or they can write a dialogue. But we generally don't read their dialogues, and we generally put them in the kind of prison that they are crazy. But normal people like us, generally, we are probably, it's really hard for us to have a dialogue in ourselves. And
keep thinking. Yes, Pushpika, go ahead. Okay. Anyone else?
Sir, don't you think that the self-improvement books are a dialogic form of writings? Like the authors who write self-improvement books are sort of, they are exploring the things, like almost all of them, I feel.
But then how are they any different from say a philosophy book or any other book? They are exploring. I mean, doesn't a mathematician have a dialogue? If you read Richard Feynman's writing on science, you will be fascinated by the kind of dialogue he must have experienced with science and scientific ideas. Yeah, keep thinking. I'm not saying it's not. It could be, but keep thinking. You need to create an argument around it, why it should be considered dialogue. Yes, Pragya.
Okay, I was muted, sorry. So we do have more others. I mean, we don't have to have others within ourselves, but we have a rational side to us, which we sort of gain the knowledge or the facts that we gain with our 5 senses. And then there are some things that are so minute that we don't register them as such, but not consciously, but what we call gut feeling, or we call as or maybe it could be our emotional selves, where we think that, okay, this is rational, but I still want to do this. So so there are these different selves, within us, and I think we are constantly having dialogues with that, or even something as simple as, okay, I need to get up and in the morning, and then we snooze it. So that is a dialogue that when we snooze it, it's within ourselves, and we're like, okay, maybe 5 minutes more, and then there's a more stronger voice that, okay, now is the limit, now you have to get up. So that is also a dialogue. We have this constantly.
But then what is the difference between reflection and dialogue? And if there are these fragmented self and all that, then from where would we bring coherence? Again, counterposing these ideas for you to think more about it. Anyone else?
Sir,
Yeah, first Arukia, then.
So another question on Bhuper position on I eat, I thou relationship on dialogue. I was so much impressed, but my question is that most of the times we are on this I eat dialogue, most of the times. Now, how to go beyond this I eat to have I thou relationship? Whereas Krishnamurti also he talks that I am born in a situation, a given situation. Therefore, that situation determines me to have I eat relationship. Now, how can I really transcend from that given situation to have I thou relationship in my dialogue?
Arukia, if I were to answer it, then that would itself become an it. So when my students ask this, I tell them there was this old ad of Melody. So Melody khao khud jan jao. So you have to eat it to experience it. So you have to do it, and you have to hold on to that one experience probably, and then work towards it. That is why I focus more on maybe things which hinder dialogue, or things or aspects or characteristics which promote dialogue, rather than ensuring dialogue. I don't know whether dialogue can be ensured or not.
Thank you.
Yeah, someone else was saying something.
Sir, I had one question.
Yes, Dishan.
Sir, I don't know any example of any book which has a dialogical approach, but I do know that there are some shows right now on OTT platforms which are interactive. So they provide options to the viewers to choose, and they will decide their story. What will be the ending conclusion of the story? So they might not be dialogical in its entirety, but they are kind of working on it. So yes, even films and medias are also slightly adapting to the narrative of being dialogical.
But then, video games are way ahead of it. And interactive, as you said. Why do we want to call it dialogical? What's wrong with saying that they are interactive? That's it.
Because maybe interactive is one of the important trait of dialogue.
Yeah, but what are the other traits of dialogue which should be there in something to be called dialogical? That was one of the questions that we discussed. If there is no other question, then Behzad, over to you.
Right. Thank you, sir. Thank you so much for this very beautiful session, very interactive one. And of course, I'm sure it gave us a lot of food for thought. Thank you all, of course, for your participation, for very active participation. I'll see you all on Wednesday next week. Thank you, Dr. Baniwal. Again.